through the front door to request a state election more than a year ahead of schedule. Voters are expected to head to the polls on March the 23rd, and they will be electing more politicians, with Tasmania's lower house to increase from 25 seats to 35 at this election. We have reporter Selena Ross standing by for us outside Tasmania's Government House, as well as ABC Radio Mornings presenter Leon Compton in Hobart. And I'm joined on the desk by election analyst Casey Briggs as Tasmania's major parties launch their election campaigns. Thank you all for joining us. So, Selena, can I start with you? We just saw Jeremy Rockcliffe entering Government House there. What's going to happen now?
So the Premier has just arrived here at Government House to request an early election from the Governor. The speculation is that that election would be for the 23rd of March, which provides a 5.5-week campaign period. Now, there is, of course, the possibility that the Governor will say no and will request that the Premier test his numbers on the floor of the House. Now, that will be challenging itself if that occurs, because the government has been in minority since May, and that was when two Liberal backbenchers quit the party to run as independents, or to be independent, sorry. And they did provide supply and confidence to the government, though, through an agreement with the Premier. But he then put an ultimatum to them only 10 days ago, where he said that he needed a new, stricter agreement with them to go forward, with them acting in partnership with the government. They rejected that proposal, and then that's led to this speculation of an early election over the past couple of weeks that culminated yesterday, where the Premier was in talks all day with his parliamentary Liberal Party colleagues and came out yesterday evening to say that the only way forward that they could see was to go to an early election.
And one of the issues heading into this election, Selena?
So one of the biggest issues that we are going to see being discussed a lot over the next 5.5 weeks is the issue of the proposed AFL stadium. Now, that is one of the things that John Tucker and Lara Alexander, those two former Liberals, now independents, quit the party over because they were concerned about the transparency between the agreement between the government and the AFL on that stadium and how much money was going to be spent on that. There are projections that it could cost around $1 billion to build a stadium here in Hobart. And a lot of Tasmanians are really concerned that we can't afford that as a state when we're already experiencing a health crisis and there are so many people who are struggling to find affordable housing in the state.
All right, Selena, for now, thank you. Also with us is Leon Compton, who presents the morning show on ABC Radio Hobart. It's very good to see you, Leon. So it seems something of a gamble. Premier Rockcliffe wants this election to deal with issues around governing in minority, but is that likely to be the outcome after this election?
Yeah, indeed, Ros, because it is a big promise that he seems to have made to the party room. We have a slight minority now, made up of two former Liberal Party members who have guaranteed confidence and supply, but still are causing some issues and some embarrassment through the latter part of the parliamentary year. What he's promising his party room is he can do better than that at this election. Now, it's a government that's already been in power for 10 years. As you mentioned earlier, the parliamentary size is changing to from 25 to 35 seats, which means you'll need a smaller quota to get in. And there's a real question about how many independents and what the beliefs and the priorities of those independents might be in any newly formed parliament. So it is a big promise that he seems to have made to the Parliamentary Liberal Party about what he can achieve a better outcome if we go to an election.
And how are your listeners feeling about it? What do they think about this move, Leon?
Yeah, there's been a lot going on. As Selena mentioned earlier, there are big questions about whether the Governor, Barbara Baker, will in fact say to the Premier, sorry, mate, you've got two people that have promised confidence and supply. Maybe go back when Parliament's resumed to sit in March and test that out. That will be embarrassing if the Premier has to come out with that outcome. But assuming that we go to an election, I mean, issues, and Selena mentioned the stadium, but everywhere you look in Tasmania's healthcare system, there are major issues, whether that's from calling an ambulance, getting delivered to hospital, the ramping that is going on there at critical rates. Then you've got the capacity to get admitted through emergency, elective surgery waiting lists, and really almost every part of the health system, as is also true in other parts of Australia, maybe not to this extent, are issues at the moment. And importantly in education, Ros, there was a figure that the Productivity Commission brought out last week, and your listeners might want to think about, or your viewers for a moment. 53% of Tasmania's Year 12 students finish having completed and achieved a Year 12 outcome. Only 53%. The national average is 76%. Many people are arguing, well, do we need to look somewhere else politically to get a better outcome than what is a woeful performance in health? We've got other issues like housing as well. Property prices here have gone up dramatically. A lot of investors in the market. So people are struggling to find affordable places for rent. That is also an issue, as well as that business confidence and industry policy that so many people are connected to as their jobs in their lives in, say, salmon and forestry.
Yeah. And how's the opposition there looking?
Well, this is interesting. So Rebecca White's already led the party to 2 election defeats. Historically, normally, and Casey would be a good person to talk about this, as one party, one government approaches the 10-year mark and maybe, approaches decline or renewal, typically you'd expect sort of an ascendant opposition. I'm not sure many people feel that the Labor Party is putting massively heavy pressure or presenting as an incredibly strong alternative government at the moment. And Rebecca White is talking about prioritising cost of living, health and education, but it still remains to be seen whether she has the foot soldiers and the potential ministers to convince people that they would be better with their hands on the levers of power.
Let's go to our ABC election analyst with me in the studio, Casey Briggs. Then, do you agree with Leon? How is the opposition shaping up? What are the numbers looking like?
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. This is a bit of a gamble for the Premier, Jeremy Rockliff. I just want to read you a quote. Tasmania can't afford the uncertainty of minority government. This election will be about who can deliver a strong, stable government to secure Tasmania's future. That is not Jeremy Rockliff's words. Those are the words of Peter Gutwein 3 years ago when he called an early election under really similar circumstances. He'd just been put into a situation where he was governing in minority because a Liberal Party member defected to the crossbench. And he went to election saying, I need a majority. That's what the Premier's saying now. Very different political context now, though. 3 years ago, Peter Gutwein, as was the case for virtually every state government, was doing really well in the polls, had really strong support. This was in 2021, at the height of the COVID pandemic. I don't know that we would expect to see the sort of support that the Liberal Party achieved then, achieved this time around. Also, you've got this growing of the House of Assembly going from 25 to 35 seats. There are 5 electorates in Tasmania. Each of them used to elect 5 members. They're now going to elect 7 members. So the quota for election, the number of votes you need, is lower. I think a number of minor parties and independents will be hoping that makes it easier for them to be elected in this new system. And so what you've got is a situation where Peter Gutwein scraped in with a majority last 3 years ago. That has not lasted through this entire term of Parliament. And it is less clear now that Jeremy Rockliff, the new Premier, would be able to achieve a majority. We may end up at the end of this campaign in, maybe it's a different set of crossbenchers, but much the same, another minority government.
What's happening with the crossbenchers and also with the Jackie Lambie network? Yeah,
there's a real constellation of characters in Tasmanian politics, as there always are. So we know Lara Alexander, one of the crossbenchers, one of the former Liberals, is going to run for re-election. I believe John Tucker will as well. He has flirted with the National Party. He's expressed sympathy for the National Party. There is no National Party in Tasmania, a branch there. But David Littleproud, the federal leader, did say today, look, if they wanted to start one, he'd support that. That wouldn't be in place in time for this election. But there is maybe some speculation that John Tucker might decide, I'm going to run as an independent national in this election. You mentioned the Jackie Lambie network. They are fielding a whole host of candidates this time around. There was a poll from YouGov that put their support really extraordinarily high in the state earlier this year, probably a little bit higher than they will actually do. Big questions about how they will perform, but they are a new player in this election. If they pick up a couple of seats here or there, particularly in the north of state, that could come at the expense of the Liberal government. And it could mean that Jeremy Rockliff is needing to negotiate with maybe the 2 independents that he's got at the moment. They're going to have a tough time being re-elected, but maybe they'll be replaced by others. Maybe they'll be replaced by Jackie Lambie network members. Maybe they'll be replaced by Greens. Maybe Labor will have a great day. It's really unpredictable.
Let's go back to Selena Ross, our reporter, who's at outside Government House there in Hobart. Has Jeremy Rockliff come out of Government House yet, Selena? Is the deed done?
Well, we haven't seen the Premier emerge yet. The rest of the media has decamped out to the outside gates here at Government House. Luckily, we've been able to stay in here just for now, but we're not sure how long he'll be in there. I assume it will depend on whether it's a quick agreement or whether there has to be some back and forth negotiation between the Premier and the Governor as to whether we do go to an election or whether he does have to test the numbers on the floor of the House first. Now, as far as we know, the Premier is going to be doing a press conference at about 3 o'clock to let the public know what's going to be happening here. So it's all still a little bit fluid at this end as to what's happening and what we're going to be seeing, but that's kind of what our expectation is at the moment.
All right, we'll leave it there. Selena, Leon and Casey, thank you all.
Thank you.
And as we've just heard, Premier Jeremy Rockliff will be holding a press conference in the next hour or two. We'll bring that to you live here on the ABC News channel. But for now, we're taking you live to Canberra for question time in the House of Representatives.
We also don't want to leave people behind. We want to support average workers. We want to support aspirations. And that's why